Welcome, everybody, to the Old Time Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I am your host for the Old Time Boxing Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in our resident ring historian at thegruelingtruth.com, Chris Shelton. How you doing, Christopher?
Good. Just really glad for the topic of Spinks. We get things before, so this is going to be a fun one. It's one of my things for podcasters.
Yeah, we did Michael Spinks a couple weeks ago. Now we're going to do Leon, and of course, Leon has had some health issues lately, so we all want to send out our prayers to him. And I also want to bring up the fact that we are brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation. Check them out on Facebook with Alex Ramos, Jackie Richardson. They do a great job there helping retired boxers. All right, let's start off with Leon Spinks. And the thing that stood out to me was looking at his career. How many guys said that Leon Spinks was one of the greatest amateur boxers that this country produced at this weight class?
Well, yeah, it was never knocked out. Never knocked down, I should say. It was never knocked down as an amateur. And his Olympic run, he didn't lose a single round. He scored 2 knockouts. There's a patriotic times, with Sugar Ray Leonard and Howard Davis, but Spinks took out a guy from Morocco, the Soviet Union, East Germany, Poland, and in the finals, a Cuban. So Leon Spinks and Sugar Ray Leonard especially were big stars in a way that people aren't coming out of the Olympics these days with quite that higher profile. Well, Howard Davis had a lot of emotion coming in because his mom died, but I really think Sugar Ray Leonard and Leon Spinks is who I remember most, even though Michael Spinks also won a gold.
Yeah, and we look at his amateur career. He won the 74, 75, 76 National AAU Light Heavyweight Championship. He defeated future champion Michael Dokes for his first AAU title in 1974. And then, like you said, in the Olympics, I don't think a lot of people thought Sixto Saria would actually beat Leon Spinks. And Leon, if you watch that fight, dominated him and stopped him in the third round.
He did. He dominated really all his fights. And, the Cuban boxers were really good. Obviously, I don't know if everyone knows these days they couldn't fight pros, so their best efforts were going to be in the Olympics. And, Leon Spinks dominated him, a good fighter, and really the team was cheating. Well, his team was cheating. They were shouting instructions and stuff from the side, which they're not allowed to do. But nonetheless, cheating in a great boxer can defeat Leon Spinks. Leon Spinks was on fire at that point in his boxing career. He's an amateur. He's still a Marine, too, so the Marines are all rooting for him. But at the boxing part of his life, he was at his peak, and he said the happiest that he ever was as a boxer.
Yeah, and then he turned pro January 15th, 1977 in Las Vegas, Nevada. He defeated Bob Smith, and his career basically started off his first 2 or 3 fights like most guys do, fighting guys that are right around 500 or even below 500. And then they fast-tracked him starting in May, and he fought Pedro Augusto, who he knocked out, and Augusto was a fringe contender. Then Bruce Scott, and then they put him in against Scott Ledoux, who was a fringe top 10 guy for the better part of 4 or 5 years in the late 70s, early 80s, eventually got a shot at Larry Holmes. And that fight's controversial. It was at the Aladdin Theater in Las Vegas, Nevada, and it was a split decision draw. You watch this fight, though. It was a damn good fight, and Scott Ledoux was not a slouch. I mean, he wasn't on the Larry Holmes level, but very few were. And when I saw this fight, I actually gave the edge to Ledoux a little bit.
Well, I was really glad that in retrospect, he took this fight. Well, Ledoux had already been warned by the Nevada boxing holding and punching and things like that. So I'd say I wouldn't call him a dirty fighter. Well, he was a little bit of a dirty fighter. He's a medalist. He's going to lean against the ropes. He's going to grab you. He's going to hold and punch. He's going to do what he has to do. And he experienced. And Leon Spinks needed that more than he could have imagined. And this didn't go in the distance. Spinks was hard. He comes out on fire, aggressive, just like as an amateur, firing away at punches. And Ledoux would try to lean against the ropes and then figure out what he could do from there. And, a lot of Spinks punches, they weren't landing. They're being blocked. And Spinks would just keep throwing punches. And you had to think about, tiring it out and stuff like that, which, again, Ledoux was probably working on, too. I mean, he was fighting somebody who's experienced and smart, but Spinks just wouldn't quite run out of energy. He looked like he was tiring out, and then he'd come up and have a final, his adrenaline or something to get going. And, I would hate to see Spinks, take a loss in that one. I'll call it an honorable draw. I was into Spinks, so I wanted him to win. So
I was
a
into
draw is
Scott
fine.
Ledoux. I was the president of the Scott Ledoux fan club.
Well, he's a fun guy to watch, and you know, when you call somebody a dirty fighter, you can also call him a survivalist. He's a survivalist. He's experienced, and he knows he's got this young Olympian coming at him on fire, and he's going to try to figure out what he can do. And part of like football, baseball, especially football, you know, you do certain things. Or in basketball, you take the foul if you think it's worth it in the long run. So he was willing to do things to what he thought was better in the long run.
Yeah, and I think Ledoux, what you could say about him was he was limited. He got the most out of what God gave him now.
That would give him that.
Yeah, and a month later, and you can tell here that they're fast-tracking him for Ali. And I think that was because of the Olympic gold medal, and he had a name, and you could sell it on TV. And Ali was towards the end of his career, and they didn't want anybody that was dangerous. But they put him in against Alfio Righetti, who was 27-0. He was kind of a banger. And this, if you watch this fight, I mean, Righetti tagged Spinks a few times. But Spinks, I think the thing that's missed about Leon Spinks, and it always made me mad because people would rip him and say he was one of the worst heavyweight champions ever. And maybe he was, but he was the heavyweight champion of the world. And you hear people talk about Deontay Wilder's had 10 title defenses. No, he's not. He's not that. He's not the heavyweight champion of the world. Leon Spinks won an Olympic gold medal, and he was the heavyweight champion of the world. I don't know how you can make fun of that. That right there tells you that he was a damn good fighter. And the Alfio Righetti fight really showed the heart, his ability to take a punch early in his career. And he knocks Righetti out. And Righetti, I think at the time, was ranked in the top 5.
They actually didn't knock him out. It was a 10-round close unanimous decision for Spinks.
Oh, yeah, he didn't knock him out.
And Spinks was behind on cards after 7 rounds. Now, you know, when you watch something as a young person, and I have heroes. I don't have heroes anymore. That's the sad thing about getting older. But Leon Spinks is a hero of mine. So for me, I watched the fight live. It was on television at the time. And I'm thinking, Spinks, you know, I'm all in the heart that, man, he cruised and won this thing. And then they gave him the decision. And I didn't even really listen to the scores. I don't think it's like, yay, he won. And maybe he could face Muhammad Ali and blah, blah, blah. But now having watched the fight as an older person, having to be a little more, you know, independent, you know, Righetti did really what he could do. He didn't understand English or anything, but he had a good jab, a much better jab than I would have anticipated, you know, watching it again. He was smart, trying to see if Spinks could wear out, see if he could block punches. But I just think Spinks, again, is sort of tireless energy, and again, Spinks sort of looks like he's sort of winding down a little bit by the 4th, 5th, 6th rounds, and then sort of regains his energy. And it was close enough that if Righetti had won at least the final round, he would have got a draw or possibly a win. And I think in the final round, you see Righetti putting up a good fight, but I think Spinks is still on fire, and I just hate to see it taken away from him. So it was a close win, and I'm going to watch it again and say, all right, you won a close fight against a better fighter than I would have anticipated. And a Righetti Muhammad Ali championship fight would have been the worst thing that could have happened to boxing. So it would have been 2 guys not fighting or doing anything, and that would have been ridiculous for sports at the time. So I'm glad Leon Spinks won, and I'm glad he was the one. Even if I think it hurt his career later, I'm glad Spinks was the one to give a nod to face Ali.
Yeah, and then Ali in February, which is just a few months later, gives Leon Spinks a shot at the title. And I think this is a fight that Ali really didn't expect much out of Spinks. I don't think he really trained that hard. But how about this? I mean, technically, Leon Spinks is the only man to ever beat Ali and take his title, because in 1967 he was stripped, and then when he lost to Joe Frazier, technically Frazier was the champion, even though to me Ali was still the lineal champion. Then Ali beats Foreman, Spinks takes his title. So the thing about this to me is Ali was a wily veteran, and if you go just a few months before this, Ali beats Ernie Shavers in a close, hard-fought fight. And I think the odds in this fight were 7-1 or 8-1. And the thing that really got me was the will that Leon Spinks fought with that night.
Well, I was so thrilled when I watched it live. I was so down Leon Spinks' side. I think Muhammad Ali, with his passing away and his times moved on, and the whole thing of, he could never take on Mike Tyson, it's taking a different mentions to Ali, whether people think of him. So at this point in Ali's career, there's no Mike Tyson. I was mad at Muhammad Ali. I was mad at him because I felt that he had lost to Ken Norton in a third fight, a close fight. Ali didn't fight badly. I just thought that Norton should have won. And then Shavers was a damn good fight for Ali. You know, Shavers came in there. He fought hard. I possibly deserved a knockdown in the 14th round. Doesn't matter. Ali fought a great contender, great win, terrific 15th round for Ali. So I do think he sort of didn't fight Takedown Spinks all that seriously. And really, when you watch the fight, considering Spinks barely won a split decision by only 1 point, it's kind of ridiculous. At the time, I thought Spinks deserved to win by more, but I was happy he won. And watching it again, Ali's just not doing anything. He's rope-a-doping. Sure, he's sort of in charge of what's happening, but he's not throwing any punches. He's not doing anything. In fact, they said he was loafing in the ring. And Spinks, just with that tireless energy, yeah, he's also not really landing a lot of punches or a lot of them being blocked, but he's out there doing something. And you hate to have somebody lose a title when they haven't been knocked out or clearly defeated or injured. But Ali just wasn't doing anything, you know, and he wasn't doing anything in a lot of people's minds, you know, several times. So then when he faced the last guy where he just stood around with Angelista, who Spinks eventually took on, he just didn't do nothing. And he fought Jimmy Young. He might as well, you know, what was he doing? Jimmy Young deserved that one. So I think there's a frustration to Muhammad Ali, and then Leon Spinks still had his goodwill going. So I really think Spinks won. On one card, he won by 5 points. I would give him that. And if nothing else, the 15th round is Ali's round. And Leon Spinks beat him up in the 15th round, quite frankly.
Yeah, and that was the thing that was impressive, because the thing that won him the decision is all 3 judges all scored the last 3 rounds for Spinks, and that was the difference. And
he needed it.
Yeah, and when you look at that, to be in only your 8th pro fight, and in the 15th round, because if you remember Ali Shavers, in most of Ali's fights, even Ali Norton, Ali would bring it to him in the 15th round, win the round, get the decision. But Leon Spinks, and Ali came out hard in that 15th round, and Leon Spinks gave more than what he got, and actually that last minute was all Leon Spinks.
Right, everything. I mean, Ali came out that 15th round like he always does, and he was landing his punches, but Spinks was out-countering him, and landing, quite frankly, what looked to be not only harder punches, but looked like the hardest punch Leon Spinks ever landed in his career against a heavyweight, at least. He was having hard counters against Ali, and you could see Ali, even in the last 10 seconds, is trying to do something. Spinks whacks him again to the head. Ali tries again. Ali Spinks smacks him again to the head, to the point that you had to give Spinks that 15th round. And I think it's a shame that Spinks needed that 15th round so desperately. But nonetheless, you know, if people think Spinks had to earn it, GD earned it. He had a great 15th round against Muhammad Ali. And quite frankly, I have no problem with Spinks winning. I almost think he should have won by more than 1 point. But if it all came down to the 15th round, good, go for it. And Spinks won the 15th round.
Well, if you remember, Ali didn't really complain about the decision either. And
days
after the fight,
he did.
Yeah.
He congratulated Leon Spinks. Right after they announced the decision, walked over him, congratulated the man. When he did his post-conference, remember with Frazier, he refused to acknowledge that he lost. With Norton, he refused to acknowledge he lost. He congratulated Leon Spinks. He said, this man, you know, he did a great job, and I congratulate him, and hope we're going to face each other again. Ali's a terrific sport. For his only 3rd loss of his career, and the first time out of 3 losses, where he took it really well.
Yeah, I think it was the clearest of the 3 losses, though.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you're right. You could argue technically that Joe Frazier had 2 amazing rounds against him, but if you're point by point, Ali, you could argue his way of winning. And Norton, considering Ali had a broken jaw in the 2nd round, it was a damn close fight. But yeah, I really think Spinks, you know, won. Like one judge gave him a 5-point edge. I think it was a lot closer than that. I think I was closer to that in my opinion evaluation than he was losing the 15th round, going into the 15th round, and needed to clearly win it, which he did in order to win.
Yeah, and the thing is also impressive here. Spinks entered the fight with a record of 6-0-1 with only 7 pro fights. He was the most inexperienced boxer to ever win the World Heavyweight Championship. And he also became the first challenger, and this is kind of what you were talking about, to win the World Heavyweight Championship on decision since James J. Braddock had defeated Max Baer back in 1935.
Yeah, and I can sort of understand that probably have a thing that's kind of fair in a sense that, hey, we have, and I know you like this too, like we have to have one heavyweight champion. That's it. And clearly their heavyweight champion. Now, if Ken Norton was heavyweight champion and not Muhammad Ali, at this point in the boxing thing, you can accept that. Norton, fought him hard. They fought a few times. Norton had a reputation. But Liam Spinks, is he really the heavyweight champion? Is he really the best? And there's people that think, I don't know if he's better than Norton. I don't know if he's better than Jimmy Young. I don't know if he's better than Shavers. But nonetheless, he's where the chips fall. And at this point, we have Spinks, which is on fire, and I'm just like his camp. Michael Spinks, and the two brothers are always conferring. He's always showing Michael Spinks and Liam Spinks fights, and I'm jumping down just like with him. I'm so thrilled that the Olympic champion I love so much is now heavyweight champion. Muhammad Ali finally, the judges were fair because I thought they were favoring him a little too much in his previous fights.
I was mad. When I was growing up, outside of my dad, my hero was Muhammad Ali. So anytime Ali would have lost, I would have been upset. I actually thought Spinks did beat him even as a 10-year-old watching the fight. And you watch it today, I think he just outworked Ali. And that thing about you got to take the title, I think he did because he outworked Ali. And to me, that's what taking it is. I think the two fights had one thing in common. The man who desperately wanted to win won. And the guy, the other ones, you had a couple guys that were happy, and it wasn't as important to them, and they lost. And that's the way it should be.
I agree, and I also think that two of the things that Lance Spinks did care, as you're watching his later fights, and the sort of sadness to me as I realize he's not going to stay a role model. He's not going to stay with his great reputation. It's going to decline heavily against him. But the two things he always had was high energy, but certainly for several years early in his career, and this willpower to win. Those two things were always there. It wasn't enough, especially as he slowed down despite his energy, and that willpower just isn't enough at a certain point. But that's the whole point putting against Muhammad Ali at that moment in his career. No different than if you face John L. Sullivan, the bare knuckle champion and glove champion, at an early time in his career. You're getting your ass kicked by John L. Sullivan. But if you keep waiting him out as he's getting older and slower, not training quite as well, that's what you aimed at, and that's what they aimed at. They didn't aim at Muhammad Ali, that was the greatest, in the 60s and early 70s. They aimed at an older Muhammad Ali who was vulnerable, and that's who they beat, but a win's a win.
Yeah, and March 18th, 1978, the WBC stripped Spinks and awarded the title to Ken Norton, which I think was absolute BS. And I know Norton had beat Jimmy Young in November of 77, which was sanctioned by the WBC as a heavyweight title eliminator. And that actually, especially being that it was a Jimmy Young fight, Jimmy Young, Ken Norton was a hell of a fight. And I know our next show, we're going to talk about Ken Norton, so we'll talk about that then. But I think it was wrong to strip him because I think Ali had earned the right to get a rematch if he lost his title, especially in a close fight.
I agree. I totally agree that there are many that felt that Norton had beat Ali in the third fight, and I can sort of understand a certain sense of reasoning, but you have to have common sense. Muhammad Ali is boxing at this point, and he was heavyweight champion, a great heavyweight champion. He did lose a close fight to Liam Spinks. He deserves a chance to. Let's see what happens. Muhammad Ali's a little better prepared against this guy, and of course, we didn't know for 7 months Liam Spinks is going to be a disaster. I can't even think of almost anybody else except maybe Buster Douglas, who quietly was a disaster, who won the heavyweight championship and quickly fell apart so fast.
Andy Ruiz?
Oh, yes. Well,
I mean, see, and that's the thing. When you look at it from James J. Braddock, and his was just because he wasn't as good as Joe Louis, but Braddock, Spinks, Buster Douglas, Ruiz, who gets a big win, even though I don't think it was for the heavyweight title. And the common thread is here, that Rocky story doesn't turn into Rocky 2 where they get even better. It seems more that most boxers grow up poor, and if all of a sudden you have celebrity and money thrust upon you, that kind of overwhelms you and causes you to do stupid stuff.
Right, and that's the movie one, which I won't go over everything, but one of the things I argued is that Rocky 1 and the first half of Rocky 2 were the greatest boxing everything, but it was after that the problem is now the champion is prepared for this guy, and that this guy was maybe a little over his head in the first place, and then it all happened a little too fast, and he thought of fame. Liam Spinks has been such a rising everything going his way really was just his brother conferring with him that it must have been hard to all of a sudden have everybody telling you you're great, everybody on your side. You don't believe any of it, and you're messing up. I've done drugs. Spinks did drugs. We messed up, but I messed up in a way that I wasn't heavyweight champion in front of everybody. And so everything he did was public. I remember the car crash, the newspaper headlines. It was just a disaster for somebody that I thought. I don't care about somebody being a role model, but I do care about somebody who's a Marine, Olympic champion, somebody I really liked a lot. And it's like when he took his baseball bat and beat up a reporter. Sometimes it's a little bitter. Steve Garvey cheating all the time. Sometimes you have things you think about somebody when you're a young person and really admire an athlete, and it turns out they're a human being, which is something you don't know anything about when you're a young person. Every day.
Yeah, and the thing that was really impressive about that first fight, 70 million people watched that on CBS Sports.
Well, I didn't believe it because it's sort of access to everything, and that Muhammad Ali himself is going to bring in so many people, which is why I'm so glad they picked Spinks over Rigetti, because, quite frankly, Althea Rigetti, who the heck's he going to bring in? He would have been the
Scott
worst
LeDoux should have got the shot, damn it.
Well, certainly Muhammad Ali, I don't know. I couldn't even handle Muhammad Ali. I like Scott LeDoux. I just don't think that, at least Spinks did what Ali Roper couldn't affect. Was a guy with tireless, incredible energy who just for 50 rounds.
Actually, looking back at it, Leon Spinks was probably the worst guy for him to fight. Probably worse than fighting Ken Norton again.
I agree. If all you're really going to do is rope it, though, then and actually that better off facing the Leon Spinks who faced Terry Holmes. Wasn't that tireless energy? Who at least got a little. I mean, this guy has, like me, sometimes people they can't stop tapping their foot or they can't stop, rattling their hands. He had an incredible amount of natural energy and then again a real sports willpower, and that he could certainly hit hard as a light heavyweight. It was just a question of how hard did heavyweights take these punches. But there's no. This guy was a fighter, come out tiger. He was Mike Tyson without quite the strength build for that, and they went after Muhammad Ali in the heavyweight championship because it was vulnerable, as opposed to what kind of career would you have as a light heavyweight or something. And I think if you have a shot to do it, to go for the big crown, heavyweight championship, defeat Muhammad Ali, I guess you go for it because opportunity sometimes only knocks once.
All right, so we get to the second fight, and Ali trains much harder. ABC televised the fight. Now, this is where this gets crazy. 46.7% of the TVs in the nation were tuned in. An estimated audience in this country of 90 million. And I know Jeremiah and I were talking Pricer on the Inside Boxing Weekly show a few months ago. He looked it up. Over 2 billion people saw this fight live. That was half of the entire world at that time saw this fight live. And the attendance at the Superdome was 64,000. Now, here's the thing that'll blow you youngins away that are listening. This was on ABC, Howard Cosell doing the fight, and the undercard contained 3 other world title fights. You had the Bantamweight Championship of the world, Alberto Davila versus Jorge Luan, and you had Danny Little Red Lopez defend his featherweight title against Juan Malvarez. And then the fight right before that, WBA light heavyweight champion Victor Galindez fought Mike Rossman in what was one of the biggest upsets of the entire decade of the 70s, as Rossman upset Galindez. And Ali was still a 2.5-1 favorite, but I still remember this night almost verbatim everything that happened this day. This is how important this night was to me, and I know it was to millions, billions of other people in this world.
Absolutely. It was loud across that stadium, and even a guard to control him. This is wild. And you know what? This is what I was talking about when I was being frustrated with Muhammad Ali, and I think other people were too. Now he had lost. Now he was no longer, not only was he no longer champion, people realized, man, this guy's vulnerable. He's no longer the greatest. He's no longer this. People were rooting for him now. Now that crowd, they were rooting for Muhammad Ali again. They were going to will him, cheer him, fight him to victory. And Muhammad Ali's way different than before. Newsflaw, the boastful talk, the jabber. Now, after, Spinks had taken out Reddy, Ali had jumped towards the ring, just smacked his face and stuff. Now there's a calm, almost in zen, like Ali, who like he not only trained physically, but mentally. Mentally, he was ready for that wild, crazy crowd. And Spinks was out of control. It was now an out-of-control crowd. His corner was a mess. And Ali, this is the goddamn one of the smartest fights I've ever seen of anybody, which we'll talk about in a second. Just the crowd and the reactions and everything. I still was probably rooting for Spinks. I don't remember. Oh, this wasn't for Ali at that point. Now underdog again. And now we're rooting for Muhammad Ali again. And it was nice to see that in retrospect.
Yeah, and you talked about the mess in Spinks' corner, and this is the thing. I don't think this is all on Leon Spinks. I think a lot of it was the amateur hour in the corner. In Spinks' dressing room before the fight, it was discovered that no one remembered to bring his protective cup, water bottle, water bucket, and I mean, they had no cup, for Christ's sakes, and they borrowed a protective cup and water bottles and water bucket from Mike Rossman, who was sharing the locker room with Spinks. And the other thing was, in between rounds, if you watch this, Sam Solomon told co-trainer George Benton that he would be permitted to give advice only every third or fourth round. And they would alternate. One round, Solomon would give advice. The next round, it would be Michael Spinks, the champion's younger brother. Then it would be Benton's turn. And remember, Solomon told Benton, if it's not your turn in a corner and you have something to say to Leon, just tell the guy whose turn it is and he'll relay the message. Now, Benton later said, what was I supposed to do? Go in and say, remember 4 rounds ago when I said 2? He said, and the thing was this, complete amateur hour, and I remember watching this fight, and Howard Cosell bringing up that George Benton walked out of the fight at the end of the 5th round, and when somebody asked him what he was doing, he looked at him and said, my God, it's just a zoo.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy for it's supposed to be the champion of the world. You're right. They didn't, there was a situation wrong. The water bottle not being there, you didn't have the protective cup. I'm not even sure they had the stool right away. It was just a disaster, though. It was unclear a little bit. It was clear there was a problem in Leon Spinks' corner at the moment. It wasn't clear everything else and Benton leading stuff until afterwards, but you could tell there were problems in Spinks' corner. But nonetheless, and with a rowdy crowd that wasn't going to let you get through, there was push comes to shove just to try to stay alive in that crowd. It was going to be difficult to have any kind of communication, but it was Ali right, and Ali was brilliant, and it was if Spinks. Who knows what would happen if it would have been differently on Spinks? But I think Muhammad Ali at that point was ready to do what he could to try to win every round. I'm not sure he realized how well he was doing, because I think he was asking how he's doing D'Angelo Dundee after the 13th round. He goes, and you're winning. But keep doing it. And but I think Ali was winning by a huge margin by the 13th round. I mean, this thing wasn't even close. And over again, they said, with the first fight, they were saying, Muhammad Ali had better sparring partners than Leon Spinks. But in the second fight, he treated Leon Spinks like he was an amateur who should be out there for a heavyweight title fight, let alone as champion.
Yeah, and then 9 months later, Leon Spinks returned to the ring for the first time after the 2 consecutive bouts with Muhammad Ali. He fought Harry Coetzee, and it was a beatdown. It was Coetzee's first professional fight outside of his native South Africa. I think this fight was in Monaco, and Spinks came out aggressively, attacked early, winging big power punches, and Coetzee avoided most of it, and Coetzee just destroyed him in the first round, put him through the ropes. It was ugly.
Yeah, Leon Spinks said, never been knocked down as an amateur or a pro, and clearly, I'm not sure what to do, I think, the first time you've been knocked down, especially in that situation. When Coetzee knocked him down the first time, Spinks went after him again and was quickly knocked down. And at that point, with 3 knockdowns, and that's it, the 3 knockdown rule, you really should be just holding on or being defensive, the kind of thing Leon Spinks isn't. But I don't even know where his head was at by the second knockdown. He went after Coetzee again and just easily knocked. Looked like he was desperate to grab the rope to try to keep him from falling at the end. he hit the ground, and it was over. The whole first round knockout. And just like that, with all the headlines of before he fought Ali the second time, the first round knockout, Leon Spinks went from the highest pinnacle of everything to he wasn't that good in the first place, and it was only going to sort of get worse.
Yeah, and then we started the second part of his career where he made a little run to get another shot at the heavyweight title. He started off by knocking out Alfredo Evangelista in a fight that I think was more competitive than what it should have been for the few rounds that it lasted. And then he fought Eddie the Animal Lopez. And I know this is one of my favorite guys to talk about because I think he gets really underrated. Not that he was a great fighter, but he was a tough out for anybody he fought. And this was a split decision draw. I don't know if you've seen this fight or not, Chris, but this is a really good heavyweight fight.
It is a hell of a fight. People throwing punches these days, and Lopez, I think he'd never been knocked down going into the fight. He lost to Peyton Cooney, and it was a slugger's delight. Both Lopez was flat-footed and such, but he traded with Leon Spinks. Leon Spinks went out with sort of usual high energy, I'm just going to throw punches until I drop style. And while Lopez, a little bit took punches, he certainly threw them back. And it was a hell of a fight. A fun one to watch, but it also showed, again, things real vulnerability because this guy's a guy who's going to have to drop down, and was, but against some of these experienced guys, and now they know the book on Leon, which isn't that much of a book, quite frankly. Spinks is just more and more vulnerable. I'm not even sure. I'm glad he won, so I got to face Larry Holmes. I'm not even sure it mattered at this point. So Eddie Lopez is a great fighter. It was a good fight, a fun fight I think you can watch today, a slugger's delight, and Spinks came out okay on it, and I'm glad about that.
All right, then he beats Kevin Isaac, who's a decent fighter, but then he gets a shot against Bernardo Mercado. This was on the undercard of Ali Holmes, which was Ali's last attempt to win the heavyweight championship of the world. And this is a fight. Mercado was actually a pretty big favorite. I think he was ranked number 1. He was from Colombia. Now, in 1978, Mercado had been knocked out by John Tate and Mike Weaver, but he recovered. He beats and knocks out Trevor Berbick. And then he knocks out Ernie Shavers, beat Tom Prater, who was way past his prime. Then he fights Leon Spinks. And this is a fight where I think they were setting Mercado up to get a shot at Larry Holmes. And Leon Spinks, for my money, this might have been the best he ever was at heavyweight because this was a great performance. He dominated this fight. He swarmed Mercado and ended up knocking him out.
That's an excellent analysis, which, of course, is why we do these things. I agree with that, because we don't talk about these things in advance. We don't know what the other person's going to say. But I think you're right. They're really setting this up for Bernardo Mercado to take on perhaps Holmes, because Mercado's record wasn't the greatest. He was a knockout artist. He hit hard, and he's he can be a fan favorite because people love knockout artists. And high profile, Leon Spinks is still in and a knockout of Leon Spinks, is a nice propelling agent to face Larry Holmes and stuff. And I agree that Leon Spinks fought hard. I'm not even sure I'd say he fought smart because Leon Spinks always fought the same way every time, but he got the better of the exchanges in the end, and it's a hell of a win for Leon Spinks. And I think you're right. I think he was set for Leon Spinks to lose this one. I hadn't really thought about that, but I think he was set up probably to lose this one. And Mercado is a great knockout artist and sort of a fan favorite because of that. Spinks would be a good person to not only defeat, knock out before facing Larry Holmes.
Yeah, and he gets a shot at Larry Holmes, and this is when people are trying to pump up the Holmes-Cooney fight. Holmes was a 4-1 favorite. Only about half the seats were filled that night in Joe Louis Arena because Holmes never was as popular as a Muhammad Ali, and this fight was built as a tribute to Joe Louis, who had died a few months earlier. Holmes was coming off a fairly easy but tougher than expected decision win over Trevor Berbick. Once again, primetime on ABC. And this, for my money, from probably this fight to that Cooney fight a year later, Holmes was the best he ever was, and he absolutely dominated Leon.
It did. It's surprising sort of in retrospect to see that so many journalists, they think the edge going into the fight because while I still remain a fan, I've probably been disappointed as a young person to find out my heroes are human beings. And even Spinks himself says, I was no longer the same fighter. I'm only 27. So he says, I'm no longer the same fighter. And it didn't matter. Larry Holmes would have cleaned his clock. I think Leon Spinks at his peak. But yeah, it was kind of sad to see it just so one-sided, a third-round TKO. And they still let the fight go on too long. I mean, it was clear that this is one-sided all the way. And that almost, that is the end sort of Leon Spinks is a heavyweight. And he's still going to keep his career going, but yeah, that's a one-sided, sort of just a brutal. It wasn't Larry Holmes being brutal. Larry Holmes was being himself, and his jabs are brutal. And then once he sees that you're in trouble, and he's had Spinks in trouble, then he finally started unleashing on him, and you don't see that Larry Holmes very often, and you don't see early round knockouts. Larry Holmes went for it and just battered Leon Spinks until after they finally stopped it, a couple of knockdowns and such. And said, that's it. And like I said, they let it go too long, if anything.
Yeah, and for all the people out there that think Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua are great fighters, go watch Larry Holmes and Leon Spinks. Larry Holmes will show you what a great fighter was. Now,
Ken Norton said it out there, because we talked about it. Ken Norton said, the reason Larry Holmes doesn't get his due is at the moment of his peak, there's just no one that was as good as him. So he could.
Yeah, but you know what? If you're going to do that, at his peak, nobody was near as good as Cassius Clay or Muhammad Ali. At their peak, nobody was as good as Joe Louis, because the Schmeling thing, I think, was before the peak. So I think that's unfair.
Fight, but I know what you mean.
Yeah. All right. Now, Leon ended up moving down to cruiserweight. He had fought between 198, 203 pounds through most of his heavyweight career. And the cruiserweight division, I think, came in around 78, 79. Matt Parlov, Carlos De Leon, guys like that. And, Leon Spinks fights for the NABF cruiserweight title against Jesse Burnett, who at one point was a damn good fighter. He was a little bit past his prime here. This was probably Burnett's last big fight. And, S.T. Gordon had been the champion. I bring that up just because we talked about him a few weeks ago. S.T. Gordon was the NABF champion, but he captured the WBC cruiserweight title with a huge upset June of 1982. And Spinks comes into this fight ranked number 1 by the WBC. It's basically for a shot at the title. And Leon wins the fight. It was a good competitive fight. What was your take on Spinks Burnett?
Oh, I got to admit that this is when I finally watched from an objective standpoint. I don't even know if I watched it as a young person. I don't remember. But from an objective standpoint, Jesse Burnett was burned. Jesse Burnett, I think, he had to be totally dominated Leon Spinks. I thought he fought so much with his heart. Different. Leon Spinks still has willpower. Jesse Burnett is not only a better skilled boxer than Leon Spinks ever, but he really fought with his heart. He knew this was the last big one. I don't even think it was close. I think Jesse Burnett totally dominated Leon Spinks. I think it's just crushing for me to watch as an objective observer, because to see Jesse Burnett's heart completely broken when Leon Spinks is given, I think, an unfair decision.
Yeah, Jesse Burnett got a lot of unfair decisions in his career, though. But they had to give Leon it because I think the plans were that Leon would go dominate the cruiserweight division, but people forgot to tell Carlos Sugar De Leon that, and De Leon whipped Leon Spinks roundly. And that's not a shot at Leon, because Carlos De Leon, to me, is one of the great cruiserweights of all time. I think he is one of the most underrated boxers of all time, and he dominated Spinks.
He did. He dominated him. He scored an easy TKO of Spinks. And I know something about Jesse Burnett. For some reason, there's just the way these things are hyped. And somebody's hyped to move them along, and someone else is hyped to fail. And it's very sad, but that's why we do boxing. You try to be fair about these things. And I thought Jesse Burnett beat Spinks. I thought De Leon deservedly, took out Spinks in a way because, in the end, I want the better fighters to get their acknowledgement. And really, Spinks, there's really no reason for him to have any more title fights, though he's still a name, and that helps you a lot. A favorable name. While Jesse Burnett's not a favorable name. So I think at this point, Spinks has lost a couple in a row or in that area. I don't know if he had a something in between. But, there's no reason for him to get another title fight or anything. But the way boxing works.
But he did. He got another one after that, too.
I know.
And They set him up. He beats Lupe Guerra, Rick Keller, Tom Fisher. This sounds
Yeah.
like a rock band. And then he beats Franco Thomas, who's the only guy out of these guys. I've heard of the other ones, but I've seen Franco Thomas fight. Not a great fighter, but he was a tough guy. And he beats Kip Kane, who I think was in a Superman movie. And then in March,
Right.
in March of
Or in Rocky,
1986,
one of the Rockies or something. But,
yeah, March 1986, they give him a title shot again. And it's against Dwight Muhammad Qawi. And Qawi would go on to lose this title a few months later in Atlanta, Georgia against Evander Holyfield, one of the great fights you'll ever see. And Dwight Muhammad Qawi, that's what we need to do a show on too.
You're right.
He beat the crap out of Leon. And once again, doesn't mean Leon wasn't good. Leon just wasn't on the elite level then.
No, and Callie's, he's just really setting up for Spinks. He says the same. Charges out aggressive. Not that he'll do it, Callie, but Callie, could easily control Leon and really just wait till Leon throws some kind of wild punches and then boom, lands another, hard punch at the jaw. And he was really just sort of suffocating Spinks slow but sure with hard punches and just not letting Spinks land on him. It's sad to watch just how easily a Callie can defeat Spinks and forget that when you're blocking, you're in close because these two guys are mauling each other. They're fighting so close that you forget there could be a lot of boxing involved in something like that. And Callie was boxing, even though they were in close. He basically just keeps moving and kind of using his arms to kind of move Spinks' punches away in a little bit so he has an opening, and pow with that opening until finally this thing is mercifully over. I think in the sixth round, Callie easily winning, not losing any rounds, and at the same time saying Spinks goes out there, trying to win. He's out there aggressive. He's trying to throw hard punches, and he's got willpower, but willpower doesn't mean anything anymore, because Callie, like I said, willpower too, but it didn't matter with the Callie had willpower because he was a better boxer, a harder puncher, and there's a total mismatch that probably shouldn't have happened in the first fight.
Yeah, and then after that, that was pretty much it. He loses, I think, like 7 of his next 9 fights. He got beat by Rocky Sikorsky. Jose Rebalta, who was a tough fighter, had him on the Legends show once.
I love Jose Rebalta.
Yeah, Jose's
I won't
cool
buy his
dude.
mom's tea in Miami, but I like him a lot as a character.
Yeah, he's cool. And then he loses to Terry Mims. He lost to Randall Tex Cobb, which actually
Have you seen that fight?
Yeah, it's on our YouTube channel on The Grueling Truth, because I have...
That is the funniest goddamn fight of all time to watch. If I could just say my little trip in these guys were this 10-round fight. They both were totally exhausted out of their minds by the 5th round. And
they kept throwing punches, though.
They're trying just to stand up to make it to the end. And Tex Cobb, especially at the end of the 10th round, the last minute or so, he really looks like he's just trying to stand. Not even punches, just stand. He's so exhausted out of his mind. But Spinks is exhausted too. It's one of the funniest dances of all time to watch. And I guess it doesn't really matter who wins the fight, but they give Cobb the decision.
All right. That was pretty much it. So you got any final thoughts on Leon Spinks?